Hi everyone, and welcome back to Study Squad Essay. Today, we're tackling a really important concept in economics, the Production Possibility Curve, or PPC. This might sound intimidating, but trust me, it's super useful for understanding how economies make decisions, and it's something you'll see again and again. We're going to break it down step by step, using examples that relate to South Africa, so you can really grasp the idea. So, what's this all about? Well, the core idea is that resources are limited. Think about it. We don't have an endless supply of everything. Whether it's land, labor, capital, or even just time, there are constraints. Because of this scarcity, we have to make choices, and that's where the PPC comes in. It's a visual tool that helps us understand those choices and the costs associated with them. According to the material we're covering, this topic deals with resource allocation. It's all about how we decide to use those limited resources. We're going to look at opportunity costs, inputs and outputs, and even how things can go wrong with inefficient allocations. Let's start with the basics. Economists talk about inputs and outputs. Inputs are the factors of production, the things we use to make stuff. Think land, labor, capital, like machinery, and entrepreneurship. In South Africa, for example, a farmer's inputs might include the land they farm, the workers they employ, the tractors they use, and their own skills and knowledge. Outputs, on the other hand, are the goods or services that are produced. So for that same farmer, the output might be maize, wheat, or fruit. Now imagine a country that can only produce two things, food and clothing. That's a simplification, of course, but it helps us understand the PPC. The PPC shows the maximum amount of those two goods that the country can produce, given its available resources and technology. Let's say this country, if it dedicated all its resources to clothing production, could make 30 units of clothing, but if it dedicated all its resources to food production, it could make 25 units of food. If it tries to produce a mix of both, it will produce less of each. This is where the curve comes in. If you picture a graph with food on the horizontal axis and clothing on the vertical axis, the PPC would be a curve connecting those 2 points, 0 food, 30 clothing, and 25 food, 0 clothing. Every point on that curve represents a combination of food and clothing that the country can produce efficiently, using all its resources. Now, what about points inside the curve? Let's say there's a point where the country is producing 15 units of clothing and 10 units of food. This means they're not using all their resources. Maybe there's unemployment, or factories are running below capacity. This is an inefficient allocation. There's wasted potential. Think about Eskom. When load shedding happens, factories can't operate at full capacity, meaning we're producing inside our PPC. What about points outside the curve? These are currently unattainable. They represent combinations of food and clothing that the country could produce in the future, but only if it increases its resources or improves its technology. We'll get to that later. The PPC is built on 4 key assumptions. First, the economy is using all its resources and producing at the lowest possible cost. Second, the amount of resources available is fixed. Third, technology is fixed. And fourth, the economy only produces 2 goods. Remember, this is a simplification to help us understand the concept. Let's talk about the shape of the PPC. It can be a straight line, but more often it's curved, either bulging outwards, convex, or curving inwards, concave. The shape tells us something about the trade-off between producing the 2 goods. If the curve is convex, it means the opportunity cost of producing more of one good increases as you produce more of it. Let's go back to our food and clothing example. Initially, shifting some resources from clothing to food might be relatively easy. But as you continue to shift resources, you might have to take highly skilled clothing workers and retrain them for farming, which is less efficient. The cost of producing each additional unit of food goes up. The PPC's position and shape depend on a few things: physical resources like the amount of arable land, skills and technology, and even how willing people are to work. Investment in infrastructure, construction, research, and innovation all play a role. Now let's look at what causes the PPC to shift. There are internal and external factors. Internal factors are things the producer or owner can control, like the number of workers or the size of a factory. External factors are beyond their control, like natural disasters or the price of fuel. If a country experiences economic growth, meaning it gets more resources, better quality resources, or improved technology, the PPC will shift outwards to the right. This means the country can now produce more of both goods. Think about the discovery of new diamond mines in South Africa. That would shift the PPC outwards, allowing us to produce more diamonds and other goods. Let's move on to changes in one of the outputs. If there's a change in technology or resources that only affects one of the products, the slope and position of the PPC will change. For example, an improvement in farming techniques will increase the amount of food that can be produced, but won't affect the amount of clothing. This would shift the PPC outwards along the food axis. Okay, so we've covered the basics of the PPC, but what about real-world issues? That's where market failures come in. We don't live in a perfect world. Conditions in markets aren't always ideal, which can lead to inefficiencies in how we allocate resources and distribute income. One common market failure is an uneven distribution of income. Many people in South Africa live in poverty. The government tries to address this through welfare grants and pensions, which create a larger market and more consumers. This can help firms achieve economies of scale and shift the PPC to the right. Another market failure is monopolies, when there's only one supplier of a product. Monopolies can dictate prices and exploit consumers, especially for essential goods like basic foodstuffs. The government tries to prevent monopolies through laws and regulations. Inflation and fluctuations in the business cycle can also cause instability. The Reserve Bank tries to control inflation to stabilize the economy. Finally, pollution and the exhaustion of natural resources are market failures. Businesses might pollute the environment to make a profit, but this has negative consequences. The government can step in with laws to control the use of natural resources, but these laws can also make production more expensive, shifting the PPC to the left. So, to recap, the production possibility curve is a powerful tool for understanding scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. It shows the maximum amount of two goods that an economy can produce, given its limited resources and technology. The shape of the curve tells us about the trade-offs involved, and shifts in the curve indicate economic growth or decline. Understanding the PPC is crucial for understanding how economies function and how governments can intervene to improve efficiency and address market failures. Now, for some study tips. When you're working with the PPC, always draw a diagram. It really helps to visualize the concepts. Practice identifying points inside, on, and outside the curve, and understand what each represents. And finally, think about real-world examples in South Africa to make the concepts more relatable. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Study Squad SA, and share this with your classmates. Good luck with your studies, and we'll see you in the next video.